On an autumn afternoon, red-tinged leaves danced in the residential area of suburban Columbus, Ohio. Grace Anderson looked up at the sky while planting the last flower in her garden bed. Sunlight filtering through the clouds gently illuminated her well-maintained silver hair. The pearl necklace at her collar faintly reflected the light. "Grandma!" An energetic voice rang out from the front yard, and Grace smiled. Her grandson Ryan had returned from school. A first grader at First Community Elementary School, he was full of energy as always. Grace's heart filled with warmth at the sight of him running toward her, wearing his Spider-Man backpack. "I'm home. Look, I got a perfect score on my math test today." "Oh, that's wonderful." Grace brushed off the soil and stood up to embrace Ryan. "We'll have to tell your mother about this." As she felt her grandson's warmth, Grace savored the daily happiness. Perhaps this was the most fulfilling time of her life. Sunday church services, shopping with Ryan afterward, and gardening. The accumulation of small joys colored her days richly. Sarah Anderson was a single mother working at a major accounting firm. Having chosen planned pregnancy and childbirth, she aimed for a perfect balance between work and parenting. In this, her mother Grace's presence was a significant support. 3 times a week, Grace looked after Ryan at Sarah's house. She made time for her grandson between church activities. Since retiring from her elementary school teaching position 3 years ago, she had been able to dedicate more time to her family. That was the greatest happiness for Grace. In the evening, Sarah would return from work. Though she showed signs of fatigue, she always made sure to have dinner with Ryan. Watching this scene, Grace felt a secret pride. She experienced motherly joy in seeing her daughter living earnestly as a single mother. "Hey, Grandma. Tomorrow's Sunday. We're going to Walmart after church, right?" "Yes, of course." This was their weekend ritual. After the service, Grace and Ryan would go shopping at the nearby Walmart supercenter. They'd buy ingredients for Sarah's work lunch boxes, pick out snacks for Ryan, and sometimes stock up on American household staples like Campbell's soup and Cheerios. These ordinary moments created precious memories between grandmother and grandson. Meanwhile, her eldest son John ran a local construction company. Single-minded about his work, he often went to job sites even on holidays. He didn't seem to pay much attention to his wife Amy's fertility treatments. His wife Amy had found success as a real estate agent but was exhausted from 5 years of fertility treatments. Though she appeared with designer bags and perfect attire, there was always something lurking behind her eyes. On the surface, Amy played the role of the perfect daughter-in-law. She was kind to Sarah and Ryan, and took the initiative in cooking at family gatherings. She would roast turkey for Thanksgiving and make homemade cookies with Pillsbury dough for Christmas. However, behind that smile lay a deep darkness that no one knew about. Never neglecting her neighborhood connections, Amy attended PTA meetings and participated in church activities. Grace sometimes worried about the shadow she saw in Amy's eyes. But she tried to think it was just fatigue. No one imagined that shadow would be the harbinger of a tragedy that would strike the entire family. "Grandma, what are you making tomorrow?" Ryan's innocent question brought Grace back to the present. "Well," she answered while gently stroking her grandson's head. "How about mac and cheese? You love that, don't you? And we'll make sandwiches for your mom's lunch too." The boy's delighted voice echoed in the twilight garden. Another peaceful day was coming to an end in the quiet residential area of Upper Arlington. At 2 p.m. on Saturday, the automatic doors of the Walmart Supercenter welcomed Grace and Ryan. Under the bright fluorescent lights, weekend shoppers pushed their carts in various directions. The store was decorated for Halloween, with striking contrasts of orange and black. "Grandma, what snack should we get today?" Ryan's eyes sparkled in the candy aisle. His eyes, above his Spider-Man t-shirt, were filled with expectation. "Well, but let's get your mother's requested items first," Grace gently advised him while taking out a folded note from her handbag. Written in Sarah's meticulous handwriting, the shopping list included ingredients for work dinners and items for Ryan's lunchbox. A small note at the edge mentioned needing a new wallet. In the refrigerated section, Grace carefully selected items: cheese, ham, lettuce. Weekend sandwich making was an important tradition for Sarah and Ryan. Meanwhile, Ryan stood beside the cart, looking up with interest at the product shelves that were almost as tall as him. As they progressed deeper into the store, the number of shoppers gradually decreased. The area near the baby products was particularly quiet. Long shadows from the shelves stretched across the dimly lit aisle. "Grandma." Ryan's voice suddenly took on a serious tone. "Whose cart is this?" Grace looked in the direction her grandson was pointing. Partway down the aisle stood an unfamiliar cart. There were no shoppers around, and only the slight creaking of the cart's wheels could be heard. Upon closer inspection, the cart was piled high with merchandise. On top were 2 packs of newborn diapers. Below that was an unopened set of baby bottles. Baby clothes with tags still attached were neatly stacked. At first glance, it looked like the shopping cart of an expectant mother. But something was off. Grace instinctively felt this. Near the bottom of the cart, she noticed some disturbing items. Large quantities of over-the-counter sleeping pills. Multiple boxes of disposable gloves. Large plastic bags. And 2 bottles of bleach. The blade of a new box cutter coldly reflected the store's fluorescent lights. "Ryan, don't move from there." Grace spoke to her grandson in a quiet but firm voice. Her eyes were fixed on the documents in the cart. A floor plan of the local general hospital. Times and locations were written in handwritten notes. And a map. At the edge, the words "disposal site" were written, small but clear. Grace's hands trembled. This wasn't just a forgotten cart. She looked around. Were there security cameras? Should she call a store employee? Just then, a young employee passed by doing inventory. "Excuse me, could you take a look at this?" Grace's voice was surprisingly steady. The employee initially looked annoyed, but upon checking the cart's contents, his expression changed. "We need to call the police right away." As that voice echoed down the quiet aisle, the women's restroom door opened. Amy emerged. She was dressed in designer clothes with perfect makeup, but her expression bore a dark shadow that Grace had never seen before. Grace's and Amy's eyes met. Amy's eyes widened in terror, and the next moment, she ran toward the exit. In the confusion, Grace had unconsciously shielded Ryan behind her. She could hear alarms beginning to sound in the distance. Minutes later, security guards rushed to seal off the exits, but Amy had already disappeared into the crowd. Shoppers gathered with worried expressions. Someone could be heard calling the police on their cell phone. All the while, Grace held Ryan tightly. "Grandma, I'm scared." Ryan's small voice brought Grace back to her senses. While gently stroking her grandson's head, she said in as calm a voice as possible, "It's all right. Grandma will protect you." Outside, police sirens were approaching. In Grace's mind, past events raced by like a flickering light. Amy's unnatural smile, her excessive attention to Sarah, and her abnormal interest in Ryan. All the unsettling feelings connected in this moment. As shoppers evacuated the store with anxious expressions, police officers quickly surrounded the building. "May I ask you to tell your story again?" A detective approached the rest area where Grace and Ryan were seated. He gave the impression of being a veteran. Introducing himself as Detective Mike Johnson, he began questioning Grace with a gentle expression. "What time did you first discover that cart?" "I think it was around 2:45, Grace answered, looking down at the paper cup of coffee she held in her trembling hands. Ryan noticed it first. Meanwhile, at the back of the store, the crime scene investigation had begun. Forensic staff in white protective suits carefully examined the area around the cart in question. Fingerprint powder glimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights. "We've checked the surveillance footage," a young female detective hurried over. "Amy Anderson is clearly visible. It seems she had been going back and forth in this area for an hour." At those words, a heavy anguish spread through Gracie's chest. An undeniable truth was presented before her. Amy, that daughter-in-law who had seemed so kind, had been planning something horrific. Sarah burst in through the store entrance. She had rushed over after receiving a call at work. Her expression mixed confusion and fear. "Ryan, are you okay?" Sarah embraced her son, checking him all over. "Amy, is it true?" Grace silently nodded. A reality that couldn't be explained in words. The darkness that had lurked within the family. Everything suddenly stood before them as a cold reality. "Mom, Sarah's voice trembled. "I should have noticed." Amy had been unusually attentive to Ryan lately. Offering to pick him up from daycare, inviting him to play on holidays. "Don't blame yourself," Grace squeezed her daughter's hand. "None of us could have known." Just then, the police radio became busy. "Suspect found. Secured at home." Amy had returned home in a panic. The police secured her and simultaneously began a house search. What they found there made all suspicions definitive. Detailed crime plans, hospital staff shift schedules, records of Sarah and her son's movements, and $50,000 in cash. Everything was evidence of a meticulously prepared plan. Grace. At dusk, John appeared at the police station. Her son, who usually focused solely on work and rarely showed emotion, now had a face contorted with anguish. "It's a lie. Amy wouldn't do such a thing," he said in a trembling voice. "There must be some misunderstanding." But the evidence was clear. Amy maintained silence during preliminary questioning, and the court denied bail. A psychiatric evaluation was ordered, and preparations for prosecution moved forward. In the police station's visiting room, Grace stared at Amy through the glass. Her eyes, having lost their former brilliance, held a deep emptiness. Her designer clothes were disheveled, and her perfect makeup had crumbled. Why? Questions swirled in Grace's heart, unable to form words. Meanwhile, Sarah took Ryan to temporarily stay at a friend's house. "Mom, can't we go home anymore?" She couldn't answer her son's innocent question. At church, a special prayer meeting was held for Grace. Neighbors brought food and words of encouragement. However, deep wounds don't heal easily. "Lord, guide us." Sunday morning, at the usual worship time, Grace quietly offered her prayers. Facing the gleaming altar, she prayed for her family's renewal and for the ability to forgive. In the state police headquarters interrogation room, under dim lighting, Amy Anderson sat with her hands tightly clasped, staring at the floor. Her once perfect appearance was gone, and deep shadows marked her exhausted expression. Her designer two-piece suit was wrinkled, and her usually well-maintained hair was now disheveled. In the corner of the room, a security camera silently watched her, while a recording device's light quietly continued to blink. Female Detective Catherine Morris spoke gently. In her 20-year career, she had handled numerous cases. However, few had shaken her heart like this one. "Could you tell us how you were feeling?" A long silence. The clock's second hand ticked heavily. Amy's fingertips unconsciously scratched the table's surface. Traces of her once beautiful nail art remained on those nails. "I too." Suddenly, Amy's voice leaked out trembling. That voice was so weak, it was hard to believe it belonged to the once confident real estate agent. "I too should have had that right." Her fingers scratched the table more strongly. The right to have children, the right to be a mother. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Her perfectly applied mascara ran in black streaks down her face. Crying, Amy opened her notebook containing records of her fertility treatments. There, the traces of 5 years of struggle were meticulously recorded. 5 years. Amy continued. "For 5 years, I gave everything. Daily injections. Endless tests. Weight gain from hormone treatment side effects, and severe mood swings. But John. Her voice caught. The diary contained numerous entries lamenting her husband's indifference. John didn't even notice. Work, he couldn't see my suffering at all. Even on holidays, he'd go to work sites, couldn't even remember my hospital appointments. The air in the interrogation room grew heavier. Detective Catherine felt a deep darkness in each of Amy's words. And every time I saw Sarah, a dangerous light appeared in Amy's eyes. She had everything. A planned pregnancy. A smooth delivery. A cute son. And a perfect life as a mother. Every Sunday at church, whenever I saw her, something inside me felt like it was breaking. If I could erase that child, Sarah's child, then I too. Detective Catherine continued taking notes quietly while listening to Amy's confession. Her spine chilled at the gradually revealed details of the criminal plan. In the notebook, a meticulous plan was recorded, like a diary. The plan was divided into 3 phases. Phase 1 was infant kidnapping. Amy had used her knowledge as a real estate agent to obtain blueprints of the local general hospital. She had identified the vulnerabilities in night shift security and developed a plan to kidnap from the nursery. She had even prepared a uniform to pose as hospital staff. Phase 2 was the most brutal part. A murder planned to be executed within 48 hours of the kidnapping. The body disposal site was the backyard of a vacant house she had previewed as a real estate agent. Even the procedures for destroying evidence were perfectly planned. The notebook contained the eerie note, "I'll make them angels." And Phase 3. The elimination of Sarah's son Ryan. After obtaining a new baby, to restart life as a perfect mother, the plan detailed making Ryan's interference disappear. Even plans to stage a pool drowning accident were meticulously recorded. I too should have had the right to be happy. Amy's voice seemed to be convincing herself. Everyone around me was having children so naturally, only I was left behind. Outside the interrogation room, Grace and Sarah watched through the monitor. Sarah's face was pale, and Grace quietly held her daughter's shoulders. In Sarah's hands was a photo of a Christmas present from Amy. "Why didn't we notice?" Sarah's voice trembled. "She was so kind to us, the weekend cooking, birthday party preparations, was it all just an act?" Grace had no words to answer. Just listening to Amy's confession, a deep sadness spread through her heart. The collapse of a woman who sought too much perfection. The pressure of fertility treatments. Family's lack of understanding. And love becoming distorted. Everything seemed to reflect the darkness within modern society. The results of the psychiatric evaluation were as expected. Severe personality disorder. Delusional tendencies. Severely distorted reality perception. The need for treatment was strongly indicated. The attending physician recommended long-term hospitalization. "Perhaps we were responsible too," Grace quietly murmured. No one noticed her real cry for help. As church members, as neighbors, we overlooked her suffering. In the interrogation room, Amy's confession continued. Behind her plan lay an even deeper darkness. Childhood trauma. Abuse from her birth mother. Loneliness in marriage. And an obsessive adherence to society's perfect woman image. Everything had cornered her. Amy's voice faintly echoed. I just wanted to be loved. Just wanted to be a mother. Those words sank heavily in the room. Detective Catherine quietly sighed and stopped the recording. Now all the truth had been revealed. The court's judgment was severe. Attempted premeditated murder. Attempted kidnapping. A 15-year prison sentence plus supervised release was handed down. While noting the planned and cruel nature of the crimes, the judge considered Amy's mental state in the sentencing. After the verdict, Amy was transferred to a state mental health facility. There, she would begin long days of treatment. Her appearance, surrounded by white hospital walls, bore no resemblance to her former glamorous real estate agent self. When would healing come to a soul that had sought too much perfection? Leaving the courthouse, Grace was thinking. Everyone carries deep darkness. But if we can notice that darkness and stand beside them. Her prayers were directed toward Amy's recovery and her family's healing. In the church prayer room, Grace decided to offer prayers for Amy every day. 1 year after the incident, in autumn. As maple leaves danced in the air, Grace welcomed a new day. Beautiful flowers were blooming in her garden again this year. Within the unchanging daily life, however, definite changes were sprouting. In the visiting room of the state mental health facility, Amy sat in a chair by the window, gazing at the scenery outside. Though her former glamorous appearance was gone, there was serenity in her expression. After a year of treatment, she was gradually regaining her normal judgment. Hello, Amy. Grace spoke softly. She had been visiting Amy once a month without fail. Though there was hesitation at first, it was her own way of atonement. Grace. Tears welled up in Amy's eyes. How can I ever face those children to apologize? Deep regret and guilt. These were signs of her recovery. According to her attending physician, Amy was seriously engaging with her treatment and gradually beginning to accept reality. Meanwhile, there were big changes in Sarah and her son's life as well. They had moved to a new house in the suburbs and taken a new step forward. Mom, we made the right choice, didn't we? Sarah asked Grace in the living room of their new home. The evening light gently illuminated the room. Yes, certainly, Grace answered calmly. Everyone deserves a second chance. Outside the window, Ryan was playing with his new friends. His laughter carried on the autumn breeze. The memories of the incident, with the help of counseling, were gradually being healed. John and Amy's divorce was quietly finalized. John spent his days immersed in managing his company, but recently, he had finally begun to face the consequences of his own indifference. On weekends, he started volunteering as a counselor for couples undergoing fertility treatment. The church community also learned much from this incident. Every Wednesday night, a support group for women struggling with infertility began meeting. One day, Sarah quietly brought up, "I'm thinking of going to see Amy." Grace caught her breath. "Really?" "Yes," Sarah nodded with determination. "I might not be able to forgive yet, but I think I might be able to understand." It was a big step. The psychiatrist indicated that Amy's social rehabilitation would still take time. However, a small light of hope was definitely visible. In group therapy at the facility, Amy was able to honestly express her feelings for the first time. Her perfectionist tendencies, her heart starved for love, and her distorted maternal instinct. By acknowledging and accepting everything, she was gradually recovering her true self. "Doctor," Amy told her attending physician, "I never tried to see my real self before. Perfect wife, perfect mother. I kept chasing such illusions." The treatment records detailed her changes meticulously. Reduction in delusional thinking, emotional stability, and improved reality perception. Every night, Grace offered prayers before family photographs. Among them was a picture of Amy from her younger days. "Lord, we all stumble somewhere, get hurt, and try to stand up again. Please bring light to this family." A new season was quietly approaching. The maple leaves would soon give way to winter's cold, and then spring would come again. Perhaps life was like that too. In the garden of Sarah's new home, the bulbs Grace had planted were beginning to sprout. They would surely bloom beautifully next spring. Every morning, Ryan would peer at the sprouts, checking their growth. "Grandma," Ryan asked suddenly one day, "why do people get hurt?" Grace answered while gently stroking her grandson's head, "Perhaps it's to learn how to love. To love ourselves and others." Birds flew home across the twilight sky. Another new day was about to begin. Wounds heal slowly but surely. Perhaps this was the beginning of a new story for the Anderson family.